What's up, people? This is my very first devlog for our game Shinigami Hunter. It's not only my very first devlog, it's also my very first game. And I thought, want to make a little bit of a series where I can show the progression throughout the game. Maybe some people can learn something, but also it's for me historically show how we actually made this. And I think the very best part to start off with is to show you how I have decided on what kind of game to make. That was the very most important decision in the beginning. For some context, I have earned some money and I'm taking a career break, basically. Hired an artist and a programmer, and we have about 12 months to deliver a video game. In those 12 months, I was thinking on what can I package to deliver and be still of quality so we can make some money on it and, hopefully break into the industry and then keep making games with that. There was many ways of deciding on how we make a video game, and after some googling around and some asking some people, there's actually some really good information, and I want to highlight that real quick. It's basically this guy called Korotchenko. He's pretty well known in the indie game scene, about how to market a video game, and he has in there lots of information on how do you actually choose what game to make so you can market it, so you can sell it, and what is popular, what gets reviews, what gets picked up, etc. There's entire statistics about what genres do well and what type of games do well. After going through all of that, I've seen like a tendency of not necessarily what I really love in the video games at the moment, like horror, narrative, simulation, shooters. It's not necessarily what I really love about video games at the moment, and I couldn't necessarily identify myself with anything that was shown there. So I kind of went the other way. We will see whether or not that's for better or for worse. But I decided to do a video game which I would enjoy playing, right? So what would be my ideal game that I could make within 12 months, or obviously we could make in 12 months, that I would have fun playing, I could be proud of, and I think would also make other people want to buy the game. And I sort of I've been playing video games for 34 years, and I've gone through all of my experiences, everything I've ever loved, and sort of broken it down to the three key components that I kind of want to deliver in the video game. Number one, I love boss fights, right? I'm really, really big on boss fights. Number two, I love, progression and loot. And the third thing is I love ability-based combat. So those are the three components I want to pack into a package and deliver them within 12 months. So obviously speaking to my programmer, speaking to my artist, what is possible, what is feasible. And I want to start off on the boss fights part, right? And my programmer is a 2D artist, and also my artist is a 2D artist with who does primarily pixel art. And also my programmer has most experience in 2D. So we wanted to make it 2D, and I was thinking, okay, what kind of games do I think have really good boss fights in 2D? And there's a game where specifically I'm looking at, and it's called Heavy, right? I don't know if you know it or not, but Heavy has very, very good boss fights, and lots of them in there as well. It is a Metroidvania, which I think it's kind of its weak part, well, apart from the narrative, and the storytelling in there. The boss fights are unbelievable. I don't want to make it as bullet helly as it is in here, but I like the fact that there's all the boss fights kind of feel unique. All the boss fights kind of feel fun, and I can see us doing like lots of 2D boss fights with different mechanics, which will feel unique, and also play really, really well. So Tevi is a game which I'm taking sort of a little bit inspiration from. Moving on from the boss fights. So basically, the decision is to make lots of boss fights, 2D, which also have different mechanics in them, where it's not just, sort of beating them up or just dodging, but also want to have some interactive stuff in there. Moving from the boss fights to the progression and the loot, and speaking to my 2D artist, there's a couple of things which I've made a decision on. I love loot, and I love when loot drops and then you can equip it. It looks really cool on you. I'm an OG World of Warcraft player. When back in the day when you couldn't really transmog stuff, and also when loot really meant something because you weren't bombarded with it. Every single epic you dropped meant something. It felt really good having it, and the power increase was always very. You could really feel the power increase. Also, you always looked forward to every single piece, right? But then my artist told me one thing, that because we are a 2D pixel art game, there's a couple of things we can't necessarily do. We can't necessarily show visual progression on every single piece of item that is looted, because the way it works is that you, in pixel art, draw sprites, and you have, if this is the running animation of our character, you have to draw this sprite every single time. And if, let's say, we looted some new pants, you put the pants on, you have to redraw this with the new pants. And then if you, let's say, drop some new gloves and you equip the gloves, now you have to redraw this in a combination with the pants, redraw it in a combination without the pants. It's just way too much work, which wasn't necessarily feasible in 12 months. I don't mind too much that you don't show visual progression. For the next game we do, I will definitely put it on the table, but to deliver something in 12 months, we took that off the table first, and we want to make it feel, meaningful. And you're gonna feel it in the power of the character and in the way the playstyle works. That's where you're gonna feel the loot. And I was thinking, okay, what kind of game does a really good job in where you fight boss monsters, and you actually have to refight them as well? Because in Tevi, there's no point in refighting the boss. Tevi itself is not a short game, but we can't deliver a massive open world or massive Metroidvania or anything like that. It's just not feasible in 12 months. So all we're gonna do is like boss fights, like boss rush. And I was like, what game does a really good job in boss rushes, but also delivers meaningful progression? And to mind comes one of my favorite games, which is Monster Hunter. And in Monster Hunter, you fight a boss and it drops crafting materials. And then you take those crafting materials and you form another weapon. I understand that in Monster Hunter there is visual progression, but let's take that one out for now. There's always a reason to refight bosses, because you need to farm certain. You don't always get all materials straight off the bat. That's why I really wanted. I wanted it to be the boss fights to be so fun that there was meaning in replaying the bosses, right? So we're kind of wanting to farm them, and that also will extend our game in gameplay time. So looking at in the way Monster Hunter does it, obviously there's materials they drop, and there's materials which are rare. They don't always drop on the first try, and you need to kind of refarm them to build your next item. And I really like that idea, and I really like their approach. And if we look the way they do armor, that's kind of the layout I'm thinking of at the moment, right? Where you have a certain armor set which is tied to a certain boss, and you kill him over and over again, and you can craft individual pieces of that armor. Also, you then go to the next boss, you can craft again other pieces. And each armor piece has different stats and different abilities and different changes to your gameplay. You can then start mixing armor pieces, and I'm probably going to throw in the weapon in here because weapon tree overkill. You can mix up different items to then create sort of your build. And then you need to refight certain bosses to then change your build, because you need certain, again, other materials to then craft other things again. And it becomes this loop of, okay, I want to become more powerful. I want to get this certain build together. I need to refight certain bosses, right? So then to check on harder bosses. The goal is always to take on the next hardest boss. And for that, you need to be stronger. To be stronger, you need to fight other bosses to get the crafting materials. And that's how we're going to go with it. We're going to do the boss fights, we're going to do them in 2D, we're going to drop crafting materials. With the crafting materials, you're going to build certain items, which then fit your playstyle, or actually going to be very useful towards the other boss, towards fighting the next strongest boss. That's sort of how I was thinking about it. That's how I sort of mix in the boss fights things and the crafting and the progression. Sort of having talked about progression, having talked about the boss fights, the next, so third component which I wanted in this was the gameplay, which is for me, again, since I am an old school World of Warcraft player, I really love the way they do abilities, right? In World of Warcraft, you sort of tap the target and then you press a certain ability, and that ability then can be combined with another ability. And then there's certain conditions to use a third ability, right? For example, you can use a Bloodthirst. The Bloodthirst will fill up Rage. Rage can be then used to use the Rampage move, which then gets you enraged. If whatever you're fighting is under 30%, you can use an Execute. So there is different situations for different abilities, but it's not just one button that you constantly press. I know you're pressing buttons over and over and over again, but there is a certain sequence, because I feel like I enjoy the sequencing, and then I enjoy pressing abilities at certain moments. Because if we look at Tevi and their gameplay, it is a lot of primarily 1 or 2 buttons, right? I mean, you primarily press the melee or the ranged, and obviously apart from the jumping part. But I wish there was more abilities that they would have in Tevi, right? So I kind of want to do this a little bit World of Warcraft style, where you do a certain ability, then you can do another ability, and then it brings you up to a third ability, and then you are kind of wanting to go into a sequence. You want to look for a window where you can do the most damage, and you do use other abilities. So this is where I kind of wanted to go with it, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to create certain abilities which then synergize with other abilities and constantly play through your class, so to speak, right? That's how I really wanted to do it, and that's how we're going to go with it. So that's how I've decided to make a 2D boss rush game, right? We're looking for good bosses to fight. We're looking for progression from them to drop with replayability, because not everything is gonna get dropped from the first time. And then use abilities to for the gameplay aspect. There isn't one thing which I've noticed. There isn't necessarily a game right now on the market which I could say would fit all of that. That is something which I think is really good. And even though maybe none of our ideas are super unique, I think the combination of all of them together makes something special. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to what we actually produce, because we are rolling with this and there's no backing out of this now. So, if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a comment. I'm also on all other social medias. I'm gonna keep doing these videos to just sort of show progress throughout our game. This was the first one, and I hope maybe that helps you out on how you're gonna make a decision on your game. Have a good one. Peace.